recognize the leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and congratulations on your new role. I'm delighted to see you there, and congratulations to all the newly elected members of the House. I wish everybody good health and good luck in the work that lies ahead of us. Clearly, Honourable Speaker, a lot has changed, both in the Chamber and in the province, since this House was last in session, and here we are with our second throne speech of 2020. Both throne speeches have been remarkable in very different ways. The first throne speech of this year marked a time when it was difficult for all of us to actually get into the building because there were so many people on the outside standing up for the important work that needs to be done in this province around reconciliation with Indigenous peoples and action on climate change. And here we are in our second throne speech of 2020, and there's hardly any of us in the building at all. We've just come through a snap election. The government has earned its coveted majority, and the pandemic has raged into an unrelenting second wave, infecting 38,000 British Columbians. 527 have lost their lives, and the vast majority of those have been in the last few months. Between September 21st, when the election was called, and yesterday, when the legislature reconvened, 30,000 British Columbians tested positive for COVID-19 and 300 people have passed away. The question is not whether the election caused infections. It did not. We know that Elections BC did an incredible job of ensuring that everybody could vote safely in this province. But the question is whether British Columbians deserved more than a caretaker mode from their government during a state of emergency. Prior to the election, every member of the Legislative Assembly was entirely focused on effectively and urgently responding to the evolving emergency at hand, putting partisanship aside to unite behind the recommendations from experts, voting unanimously to get funding approved and out the door. It was the right thing to do, and it was recognized as such by many, including the Lieutenant Governor. In fact, most of this speech from the throne that we heard yesterday, the first of the NDP's new government, was spent recycling actions taken with the support of all three parties. By working together with and for our communities, 87 MLAs were able to support the provincial health officer's guidance to flatten the curve and prevent transmission in areas where, sadly, other provinces did not have the same outcomes. As highlighted in yesterday's speech, during the last administration, BC worked urgently to address outbreaks in long-term care by limiting workers to one facility, provide appropriate care in Indigenous, rural, and remote communities, postpone non-urgent surgeries to prepare for the initial surge of hospitalizations, secure large amounts of personal protective equipment for frontline workers, hire thousands of new frontline healthcare workers, including healthcare aides, and hire an additional 1,000 contact tracers to help stop further spread to the community. I'm heartened that this good work will continue with this new administration, but it's not enough. I was expecting more information about what British Columbians can expect as an economic recovery plan from this new government. We went through an election during the worst phase of a pandemic for what, Honourable Speaker? To fall behind and then continue the work that was already underway with all party support? In September, it was only days after introducing the recovery strategy that the NDP triggered the snap election, delaying the much-needed social and financial support that it was supposed to be implementing this fall. And I've reflected a lot about this election, obviously. And I think that what we have to wrestle with is the impacts on the loss of trust of the public at a time when we need trust in government more than probably any time that any of us can think of in our lives. We need public to believe what government is saying, what they're asking, to continue with the sacrifices that people are making right now, which are enormous. And yet, when partisanship becomes too dominant, cynicism in the public also rises, and that trust is lost. And the work now in front of this new majority government is to earn back the trust. We all have to actually do this together. And it's important for us on the opposition sides of the benches here to have empathy for the role and the position that government is in right now. The burden on the Premier, the burden on the ministers is enormous. I think if we stop and reflect for a few minutes, we can really feel that burden. And so it is also incumbent on us to rise above, to work for common purpose, to set aside our own anger and disappointment, and to recognize at a time like this what the people of BC need from all of us, all 87 of us in this moment, is that we put service to them first and foremost. And to the government I say, this is a time to recognize that the ways that we typically do things in here, the way that typically government responds, might not be the right thing to do right now. We had a question period in this House earlier today where the questions were thoughtful, insightful, respectful. The responses were the same. It was a discussion about issues that are very urgent and very serious to the people of British Columbia. We need that in a moment like this. We need to see that. But we also need to see from government a recognition that we've never been in a time like this before, that there's no playbook for governing in a pandemic, and that mistakes will be made, have been made, and that the effort and the willingness and the desire to always do better, and I heard that this morning from the Minister of Health and from the Premier, a desire to want to do better. But that means recognizing, accepting fallibility, accepting that you've made mistakes, and being open to trying different things, being open to hearing what people are asking of their government right now, and recognizing that people are feeling a level of anxiety and fear and worry and uncertainty that is hard for us to even imagine. And that in this moment, we can set aside some of the partisan and old ways of doing things in here, and we can, on our side, open that door to allowing a level of humanness and fallibility from government, acknowledging that this is a time unlike any other, and on that side of the House, recognizing not perfect, there's always room to improve, and listening right now is the most important action that government can take. Government needs to deliver programs quickly to those who are struggling from the impacts of this pandemic. The small business supports in place are lacking and have let far too many businesses fall through the cracks. Government needs to provide more support for teachers in their classrooms and take more decisive action to protect British Columbians' mental health. I'm gravely concerned about British Columbians who won't be here to see 2021 and brighter days ahead. It's not just the tens of thousands who have become sick with COVID, though that alone is heartbreaking. It's the thousands and thousands of people at risk of opioid poisoning and overdose death. It's the seniors nearing end of life, isolated and unable to gather with family during their final days. It's the countless others who are struggling with mental health conditions made infinitely worse by the cruelty of this pandemic and the isolation that it has brought. And it's the women and children trapped in unsafe homes, facing the threat of infection if they leave, the threat of violence if they stay. Politicians like to talk about how we're all in this together, and I've been saying this quite a bit. We are not all in this together. Yes, it is affecting all of us, but it is not affecting all of us the same ways. Some are making minimum wage on the front lines, and others, like many of us, have spent the pandemic working from home with our salaries unaffected. Healthcare providers, teachers, principals, education assistants, custodial and cleaning staff, people working in retail, food service, transportation, the grocery sector, none of them are able to stay home and continue to earn a salary. The Premier said a couple weeks ago that the response to this pandemic is, quote, a question of leadership. He's right. If his government can lead with humility and honesty, accountability and transparency, we may begin to see solutions that tackle the structural problems that increase the risk of contracting this virus. To do that, we need better data. It wasn't mentioned in the speech in the throne, and when I asked the Premier and the Minister of Health about it this morning, they indicated it's not a priority. But I still hope that this government will change course. We should have started collecting data, disaggregated data, in the spring. But better late than never. We can start now. As has been proven critical in many other jurisdictions around the world, collection of disaggregated data can help identify the communities and regions hit hardest by COVID-19. And we can analyze the trends within the disaggregated data to identify what demographics are disproportionately impacted so that government can make deliberate investments to ensure that those who are struggling the most receive the support that they need. In order for targeted relief to be effective, we need this data to bring to light the full impacts of this pandemic. As BC's Human Rights Commissioner has stated, we cannot act on what we do not know. This terrible year can be the catalyst to addressing problems that have long plagued our province. Pandemics throughout human history have preceded profound societal change. The year 2020 can be the same. It has to be. There are so many things we need to change. Inequality, climate change, systemic racism. But to achieve the kinds of changes we need, we have to be deliberate and informed by evidence and data. We know that COVID-19 has increased the inequality gap, and we need to hear from government how they intend to turn that around. Governments like to deal with one problem at a time, but in reality, we know that everything is connected. The COVID-19 pandemic is connected to humans' encroachment on nature. It is unfolding while the climate crisis continues to advance at a fatal rate and the web of life collapses around us. But these outcomes are not inevitable, far from it. We can center reconciliation and convert our energy systems to run on renewable energy, such as solar, wind, geothermal, and tidal. We can leave fossil fuels in the ground. We can follow regenerative farming and land use practices back to a healthier planet. We can create countless jobs in the process. The appetite for building back better exists in abundance. What we need is political will. I know COVID-19 can feel all-consuming, but government also needs to prepare for the future. That's the job. We expect the NDP to outline a far more ambitious plan for an equitable COVID recovery that is built upon climate action and reconciliation. And we need an action plan and timeline so that British Columbians can know when to expect concrete steps. We need to see that we're actually moving and gaining successes in the right direction. For my part, I commit to moving forward with an unwavering dedication to working in good faith to serve the people of British Columbia. I'll continue to cooperate across party lines because it remains the right thing to do. And before I close today, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the staff who work here in the Legislative Assembly, those who are required to be here in person during session, over Hanukkah, and within 2 weeks of Christmas. It's wonderful that so many elected members are able to call in virtually this week and next, but it's not lost on me that we rely on many others to put themselves at risk in order for us to be here and do the work that we're doing. For all the good that comes out of this abridged December sitting, British Columbians will have you to thank as well. Thank you.